How's it going, everybody? My name is Vic. I'm a product photographer based out of the United States. Today I'm going to show you 3 tips to take dark and moody photos. I'm going to be using a couple of things to help me out in this shoot. Everything that I'm going to be using is linked down in the description below. Feel free to check them out. The first thing that I'm going to be using is the Glide Gear tabletop mount. It's something that I picked up a while ago that has served me well over my entire product photography career. It's used very universal, and it can be used for a lot of different things. The second thing, of course, is a camera. I'm going to be using the Canon R5 paired with the 85mm 1.2. I'm also going to be using a velvet backdrop that I got with a photo booth kit that I got a couple years back, and it was one of the backdrops that came with it. Velvet is ideal for these kinds of shoots because it absorbs the most light. It's non-reflective, and the black stays black. But one of the cons to using velvet is that it traps a lot of lint and fuzz, and you do have to do a lot of editing in post. The fifth thing that I'm going to be using are clamps. Of course, the clamps are going to be used to hold the velvet onto the Glide Gear tabletop mount. I'm going to be shooting this pumpkin here. I have a couple of pumpkins that I picked up from work, and in addition to the pumpkin, this is going to be the main subject. I'm going to be using these candles, generic candles that are going to serve as props with no labels or markings on them, and they're going to burn nicely. And the last thing is these little fairy lights that I got. They're just basic fairy lights that I think are going to add some cool bokeh. One of my favorite things about product photography, if I could have a moment of your time, is not necessarily the working with the clients and getting all that stuff. That's fun, that's fine and dandy, but I love the ability to express myself or find solutions to recreating a photo that I may see that inspired me from Pinterest or from a magazine, and really understanding how to manipulate the light or manipulate the subject matter to achieve a certain look and a certain feel of a subject or a product. In this case, it's going to be our lovely pumpkin. The 3 tips that I'm going to be sharing with you today to achieve dark and moody photos is: number 1, being able to control the light. Today we're going to be using window light, and it happens to be an overcast day, so it's going to work in our benefit. The second thing that I want to go over is less is more. Now, when I think of dark and moody photos, I like to envision something that's on its own, a sense of solitude. So I'm not going to bunch up the photos with a bunch of other pumpkins or a bunch of props to overcrowd the scene. I'm going to have a singular pumpkin, and I may throw in another pumpkin just to see how it looks, but I think that it being on its own is going to really add to the mood of the dark and moody feel that I'm trying to achieve. The third thing that I'm going to be going over today is experiment. Photography can be subjective, so what may look good to you may not look good to the next person, but this is where you have the freedom and creative freedom to explore in this art form. A thing that helps me experiment is having the surface that you're going to be shooting on wheels, especially when you're working with natural light, because, not to seem incredibly obvious, but it's simple to move a surface around that you're shooting on than it is to move these giant windows. In addition to that, the natural light that comes from Mother Nature, the sun, it moves throughout the day. So with the ability to move and have your surface that you're going to be shooting on wheels is incredibly helpful, so that you can move the table around and get a perfect angle that you're looking for. So this is the first thing that it was on the list, is being able to control the light. In addition to being able to control the light, all of the 3 things that we're going to be going over today work hand in hand. So they don't necessarily go in a 1, 2, 3 order, but they're just foundational things that I think that it's very important for you to keep in mind. Another tip that I wanted to go over is starting with less at the very beginning. So less is always more. So here we're going to be shooting the pumpkin all by itself while keeping in mind to control the light. Now the way that we're going to be controlling the light is just by simple closing and opening of the blinds, and we're also going to be adding fill light on one side or adding bounce on one side and then taking it away. And that's where the third thing comes in, is experimenting. So remember, the three things that we're going over is being able to control the light. Number two is less is more. And then number three is not to be afraid to experiment. What I mean by that is putting things in, taking things out, rotating, moving the camera around. Here I have the camera about 4 to 5 feet behind on the 85mm 1.2, and I'm going to be moving the at this point I'm going to be moving the subjects instead of moving the camera around to do some still life and try to capture this in unique angles. So with that little sequence of photos, I wanted to demonstrate a couple of things. That I started off with just the pumpkin, the subject in the frame, and then I slowly started to add new elements. So I added a candle, and then I lit the candle, and then I added another candle, and then I just continued to build off of that, right? So again, I wanted to emphasize that this is probably my most favorite part of this kind of photography, is that I get to experiment with different things, right? I'm moving the light in and out, and even though that this kind of stuff doesn't look like it's doing a lot, on this side it does cast and it does move the light away. And if you're shooting in a raw file format, you can really manipulate those the shadows and the highlights in any image when you start editing your photos. So the other thing that I want you guys to keep in mind is keeping the edit in mind. This may not look like the most exciting setup in the world, but when we get into once you get into the Lightroom and you start editing the photo, you start to see how it all starts to piece together. And yeah, this is the fun part. This is what's fun for me. So a quick recap of the things that we went over today. Number one was control the light. Dealing with natural light, you're at the mercy of what the day looks like and what you have in terms of windows. Now, you can control the light even further by adding artificial light, adding studio lights, adding strobes, or adding LED lights. But my favorite type of photography comes from shooting with natural light. The second thing that I want you to remember is less is more. When dealing with dark and moody photos, try not to overcrowd the scene where your subject is. I personally like to start with a blank slate. I add one thing at a time, take a picture, move the subjects around or move the props around the subject, and then continue to add different elements such as textures, different types of patterns to see if you can achieve a different look. But I do that one at a time. I don't jumble up the scene all at once. And the third thing that I want you to remember or to keep in mind is to experiment. Photography is incredibly subjective, and this is the fun part of photography, is trying to achieve a certain look or a specific look and then posting it to see what the world thinks of your work. Sometimes that can be a little nerve-wracking, but once you get over that, some people are gonna like it and some people aren't, but that's okay. You're gonna try again next time, or you're gonna learn from that experience. So don't be afraid to experiment. Another pro tip that I wanna add is one thing that I wish I would have learned a little bit quicker earlier on in my career is keeping the edit in mind. Now, some things that you are gonna be doing may not look ideal inside of the camera, or it may not look the way that you think that it's gonna look, but if you keep practicing with the editing software, Lightroom Mobile, or whatever software you may be using, you can manipulate photos if you're shooting in RAW a lot. So keep that in mind, keep the edit in mind, and remember that some of the mistakes, if you are committing any mistakes, they can be fixed in post. I have a video planned once a week for the remainder of this year, and as I continue to grow, I'm going to continue to ask you as a viewer and a subscriber to give me some video ideas so I can continue pumping out the content. I have videos lined up for the remainder of the year. They're going to be lenses, STM lenses, some of the more budget-friendly Canon lenses, some L series lenses, and new gear as I acquire things. And I'm also going to be reviewing. I'm also going to be doing how-tos and tutorials on how to get started in product photography. I made a video a couple weeks back, link right up here, about how to get started in product photography and how to get your first paying client. If you haven't checked out that video, please do so right after this one. I really appreciate you guys being here. So that's gonna do it for today, guys. I invite you to follow me on Instagram, subscribe to the channel, send me a direct message if you have any questions about the things that I went over today. I'll happily answer anything. I appreciate you guys so much. Adios. As a thank you, I want to show you my cat. Her name's Miss Nubes, and she's pretty awesome. Say hi, Miss Kitty. All right. That's probably time for her snacks. That's probably what she wants.